Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast. I'm Chris Garner, joined by my co-host Tayte in the Hour, and today we'll be giving our review on the third installment in the new X-Men trilogy, or the ninth installment overall. I don't know, timelines are so confusing now.
Are we counting?
It's the ninth.
Are we counting Deadpool as an X-Men film here?
I think it technically does count because, I mean, it uses some of the same characters and things like that, but it's kind of its own thing. Anyway, this is the third outing with the likes of James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence. Directed by Bryan Singer, written by Simon Kinberg. Mixed reviews on this one, really. Like, before going in, like, I was actually kind of taken aback by, like, reading the newspapers and on the internet, just how mixed the reviews were for this, which is a shame because Days of Future Past, actually, if we're going to sort of go into the history of the X-Men films a little bit, Days of Future Past, I watched this before I went to see this yesterday evening, and it remains one of my favourite comic book movies ever made. I mean, I think Days of Future Past is perfect. First Class was a lot of fun. I expected that to be really, really bad. I remember when I went to the cinema to see that with a new director on board, and I thought it was a reboot, and I really, really didn't want them to reboot the X-Men franchise, but they kind of did it in a genius way. And then we get this one, and trailers, immediately I knew that it probably wasn't going to be as good as Days of Future Past. I went into it with that knowledge on board, but before we get into it, what's sort of your take on the X-Men franchise as a whole?
I liked, believe it or not, the first three X-Men films. Please do not hate me for liking on X-Men The Last Stand. X-Men The Last Stand was the comic book film that I almost grew up with. That and Spider-Man. And those two kind of... I watched X-Men Last Stand. I liked it when I first saw it. I saw it again recently. And there's a lot of good scenes in that film. There is a lot of good in that film. And people are just kind of being, I'd say, a little bit hateful on the film. And it's kind of built and built and built. And I can understand why that there was a lot of hate going towards the film. But I can also understand, like, that it's a decent film. It serves its purpose. And I'd say that the newer X-Men franchise, we've got First Class, which was amazing. I completely love that film. And then we had Days of Future Past, where I'd say the only difference between those two films, as in my favoritism wise, was the scene with Quicksilver edging out that film. But yeah, I was quite excited going into this, and then I kind of saw Empire's review, which was a 2-star, which really isn't good. I know Expendables 2 got given a 2-star. Wait
a minute, sorry. Did you just say Expendables 2 got given a 2-star?
Expendables 2 got given a 2-star.
Expendables 2 is one of the greatest action movies ever made. I adore Expendables 2. I will fight anyone on that. I love that movie to death.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
Expendables 1 and 3 I can't stand up for, but 2 is fantastic.
Okay, so I did that, and then I went onto IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes was complete middle ground, 51%, and X-Men Apocalypse on IMDb is 7.7 out of 10. So very mixed reviews all over the place. So I'm pretty sure it has people divided on whether it's good or bad in some way, shape, or form, and I guess we're going to discuss that now.
Yeah, definitely. So, as always, these reviews will split into two sections. We'll kick off with our spoiler-free section, so you haven't got to worry about us spoiling anything at all. And then when we eventually get to the spoiler section, we'll let you know when that's coming up. X-Men, I'm still going to sort of just go on my first impressions here, and then I'll sort of get into the review with this. But X-Men is probably the most inconsistent superhero film franchise I have ever seen in my life.
Are you going with 2 hits, 1 miss? For both sets.
2 hits. Yes, I think I am. Yeah. But so I mean, I should have known that this probably wasn't going to be as good. But we have kind of been spoilt with the X-Men films recently. I mean, even including Deadpool. I mean, it seemed like they'd learnt from their mistakes. With I think people are pretty much unanimous in the X-Men Origins Wolverine is the worst one they've made. Yeah. I can't say the same for you with X-Men 3 The Last Stand. I remember being hyped for that.
I'm not saying that it's like a good film. What I'm saying is it was the weakest of the original set of X-Men films. However,
But you still
the amount
appreciate
of
it.
hate that it got given was just unjustified.
Yeah. And then since then, it seemed like Fox had really found their footing with the X-Men franchise. And as I said, First Class, Days of Future Past, Deadpool, everything was going great. And then we get this movie. So we'll get into our overall impressions later, but let's kick off with the familiar faces. So returning cast members, as I said, James McAvoy, Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, Nicholas Hoult.
Hold on. Are we not going to do a thumbs up, thumbs down for this film, or?
Yeah, let's kick it off. It seems a bit weird doing it on Audacity. I think that's what's throwing me off, because we kind of moved into live action and now we've gone back to an audio podcast for this, so it's kind of just, it's messing with everything.
Old school.
We are indeed. So X-Men Apocalypse. I didn't hate it, but it is massively average, and I will agree with the bulk of the reviews on this one, in that I think it is pretty much middle of the road. 2, maybe 3-star at a push out of 5-star. 50% I think might be a little bit harsh. I think it's a little bit better than that. For example, I enjoyed this film more than the likes of Avengers Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
And Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3. I think what it is with X-Men, and I put a status on my own Facebook last night saying, it's okay, X-Men Apocalypse. I know you're a bad movie, but you get a free pass because you're X-Men. And I am kind of like that, because I like these characters. Every outing I always look forward to, and it's not massively oversaturated as well. So it's not like every other Marvel movie where, you know, Captain America's in this one movie one year, then you'll get another Avengers film, and then he'll cross over into an Iron Man film. It's X-Men. You get one movie maybe once every 2 years, and I like seeing these characters. So I didn't hate this movie. It kept me entertained, but to me, at least the previous 2 X-Men movies have always been a bit above that. They've always been a bit more grounded and a bit more... it's going to sound like really just up my own arse, but intellectual almost in terms of the superhero films. They've always based themselves in history, the last few, and I really missed that with this one. I think that was a really missed opportunity. I mean, this was set in the 80s. There are plenty of awesome things they could have done with that. First Class, you had it set in the 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis, in the 70s. You had Nixon and everything like that with the Mutant Act. That was really, really cool. And then this one, yes, it's set in the 80s, but it's more like a kind of aesthetic. Like Nightcrawler will be in Michael Jackson's Thriller coat, and that's about it. So it's like a cautious praise from me. I didn't thoroughly enjoy it, but it kept me entertained.
When I think about this film, because I have really come just straight from the cinema, I got back about half an hour ago, I broke it down into what elements of the film I liked, what elements of the film I didn't like so much, and what weighed out on top. And to be honest, this film was entertaining, and I actually quite enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was as good as First Class, Days of Future Past, Deadpool of recent times. I'd say it was better than The Wolverine, and I would say that it was a good film for its purpose. Now, when I say that, I really do have to go into the details, so I'm going to save it for the spoiler section. But it getting 2 stars and people saying it's an average film, when you think about films and sequels, if you get 2 extremely high caliber films, such as First Class, Days of Future Past, and then it's followed up by a film which gets 2/3 of the film right, and then maybe just a tiny little element of the film wrong, people will latch onto that because they know that they say, oh, you've done 2 films of this kind of sort by now, you should be knowing the formula, you should be able to get it perfect. No film will ever be able to do that consistently. I mean, think about Star Wars. They had 3 incredibly good films, and then they had a suggestible 3 mishits. This film is a slight mishit, however, you're still hitting it, and it is a good film for its purpose, and I feel like it may be kept under the shadow of Civil War that's being brought out this year with, I'd say, very similar themes, but that isn't really spoiling anything because that's kind of already said in the trailer. But still, it's difficult to weigh up, and overall I would give it a thumbs up. I tell people to watch it. It's a good film. However, I know that there is a lot of division on this film. I liked it, and I think that people should just kind of lay off it, you know.
I mean, this film isn't so bad that it's like a franchise-destroying entry into the franchise. It's nowhere near that bad. I think what it is once you've come off the heels of Days of Future Past, which had so much at stake. I mean, it was Wolverine going back into the past. He had to change the future because mutants were all about to be wiped out. The story in this one really doesn't feel as strong, and I think what's down to that as well. I don't know if you got this impression. I felt that a lot had been cut out of this movie. With Days of Future. Yeah, like with Days of Future Past, we had the Rogue cut, which wasn't a drastic change to the film, but it was like a nice little embellishment. You got the whole subplot with Rogue going on in that movie, which had some nice character moments, more for the future stuff. And in this one, I think this film was just trying to do a bit too much, I think, because I think more so than any of the other X-Men films, this one really suffered from character bloat to me.
Yeah.
And it was a very ambitious film in that it had to introduce a new villain of Apocalypse, so you have to establish him, and not only is it just like one villain, he has 4 horsemen with him, so you have to set up them as well. And also with the X-Men cast, you have all the new faces in this one, so you've got to establish them for your future team going into the next few movies. So there are a lot of characters that had to be built up from the ground up. So I would say the first half of this movie is pretty much just trying to get to know a shred of character from each individual, but it's a lot of people just kind of standing around with not much happening. There doesn't seem to be much narrative drive, at least for the first part of the movie.
I'd say the first part was one of the best well done parts of the film, but I'm pretty sure that by saying that, like talking about the other parts of the film, we're probably going to spoiler territory.
Yeah,
I'd say that the way that the different characters set up, the new ones especially, at the start of the film, it felt like something. It felt like they were building things up. They were really kind of trying to get people into the film. And it's very difficult with a film which was, what was it, 2 hours 20?
Yeah, about that, yeah.
I'd say that the first half an hour is spent building character, and that is needed for the film. It really is. Otherwise, the rest of the film would have just sunk so fast. Like, it was needed at the start of the film to establish where people lay in the plot, where everyone's mental kind of state was at the start of the film, and see where it is at the end of the film, where the stability was, where the stability wasn't, and see the differences made from the previous 2 films, because really the narrative does split across the 2 films and carry forward into this film. Some stuff that was featured in First Class did not feature in Days of Future Past, but featured in this film. So you've got to get 2 films worth of narrative forward into one film. That may take a while, and the half an hour they took to establish the characters, establish the plot, establish what was going to happen, was very well done from my thing.
And I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here because we usually sort of cap off with positives and negatives, but I think the biggest wasted potential for me was of all the new characters. I mean, from the trailer we saw all these new faces. We had Angel, we had Psylocke, we had all the new cast, new Storm, new Nightcrawler, Cyclops, Jean Grey, all this, and they really... Probably with the exception of Jean Grey and maybe Cyclops at the start, we really don't get to know any of these characters. Psylocke maybe has one line in the whole movie, and Angel really doesn't get all that much to do in this film, and that's kind of disappointing because I thought that X-Men had learnt from their failings before. I mean, X-Men Last Stand had the same thing. I think even Psylocke was kind of in that movie, although she wasn't anything like the character, but... It was like they were just throwing new mutants in just for the sake of having new characters in the film. And I don't know, like Psylocke, I said this on all my reactions for these trailers. Psylocke, visually and power-wise, is fantastic in this film. But if you ask me to say anything about a character, I wouldn't be able to tell you anything. They're very much sort of like Darth Maul in this film, where they all look cool, but they really don't have any substance to them at all, and that's a shame because X-Men's always done a really good job of that, at least in the last 2 entries anyway. Yeah. But let's sort of get into the characters more now because we've got a lot of characters to talk about, so we'll talk about the familiar faces. McAvoy and Fassbender, as always steal the show.
Always.
Just say their chemistry together in every single one of these films has always been the most fascinating to me, and sort of the core narrative drive between these two, and they're equally as fantastic in this. I would say that perhaps McAvoy doesn't get as much to do in this film. Days of Future Past was kind of really all about him, where he's this broken man, he's lost his way, and then he talks to his older self, and it's really about him sort of like corralling everyone together. This one, he's in it, and he is funny. He does get some more humorous moments in this film. He's not the stoic guy in the wheelchair in this film. And Fassbender, well, I can't go into it too in depth in this one. We'll get into it with spoilers, but they do a lot of stuff with his character that I really didn't expect them to go in that direction.
I liked it.
And yeah, so did I. And he goes back to a certain location, which just is completely the epitome of his character. Really fascinating stuff. But then it gets towards the end again, and he sort of gets very much sidelined, I would say. It does kind of turn into a big, loud CGI action fest at the end. And to me, I just didn't have any sort of connection to it at that point. But other characters as well. Jennifer Lawrence, who I was concerned with actually in the trailers, where they were really pushing this Katniss image to her. And that really isn't the character of Mystique. I've always liked Mystique in the older films when Rebecca Romijn played her, where she was much more espionage-driven. She was the spy and, you know, all this. She was almost like a Bond henchwoman, I would say. And then, since then, they've kind of pushed her as this military figure. And they do in this film, but it wasn't to the extent that I expected it would have been, you know, from the trailers.
Yeah, no, I'd say that as well. I'd say that, like, the way her character developed throughout the film was completely different to the way it was portrayed in the trailers. And that's sometimes an issue with a lot of films, where the trailer portrays people differently to how the actual film wants them to be portrayed. And I'd say I liked the direction that she went in the end. I didn't find her annoying in any way, shape or form, where I know a lot of people did in previous films, thinking, oh, what's she doing, going off and being the main character where her character isn't even that important as part of the storyline. And a lot of people were hating on her because they thought, oh, she's the popular actress at the moment, she's the one who brings in the views, they need her to be a major part of the plot for that. In this film, it didn't feel like it. In this film, it felt like she was really a side character who was just used for motivation, and then she actually became action-packed maybe towards the end. Although she had less to do in this film, a lot more to do in the previous films, she still felt like a massive part of the story.
Yeah, and I kind of like her progression as well between all three of the films so far, in these newer three. She does have a very believable character arc, and this film does reference Days of Future Past, and it is a direct sequel to that. It does follow on from the themes of that and sort of where the characters were at the end, with one exception, which I'll get to in the spoiler section. Other returning cast members, you have Nicholas Hoult playing Beast, who's also great. Very, very different to Kelsey Grammer's take on Beast, but he's always cool in the role. Moira McTaggart is back, who wasn't in Days of Future Past, but was in First Class.
She was. I'd say that her character really hasn't changed much between the two films, and she was okay in the first film, so just character.
Some of the best bits of this film, I would say, are the character moments. I really didn't care for any of the action, but the character moments, especially between Charles Xavier and Moira McTaggart, was some of my favourite bits in this film. Very, very human and believable. And they do I'm not going to go into spoilers, but they do kind of clear up one of my biggest problems I had with the ending of First Class. And because, I mean, again, we talk about ambition with this film. Not only was it setting all these new characters up, it is kind of the first movie, I guess Deadpool is technically, but this is the first movie which is the one after they've reset all the timelines. So it's pretty much free reign at this point with what they can do. And also, you mentioned him at the beginning, but another returning cast member. I'm going to try and find out his name quickly. Is Evan Peters playing Quicksilver, who I'm not going to go into it in depth, but rest assured he does get another almost movie stealing scene with his super speed powers. And then you get all the new faces. So, as I said, a whole load of them, but they really don't get much to do in the film. For example, Psylocke, Storm, Angel, even so much as like Nightcrawler, they really don't have a whole lot going for them in this film. The main push, I would say, is probably Jean Grey, maybe Cyclops, and especially Apocalypse. So I guess we should start with Apocalypse, as the film is technically about him.
One of the mainstays actually in the film was Nightcrawler. I'd say that he had a big element to do with the film. His powers of basically teleportation was used almost every single scene he was in. So I'd say that he was a massive part of the film. And I'd say out of the three, let's say the three newbies who really did come forward in the film, they were in a lot of scenes together just because people know they're going to be the next ones forward. So I'm pretty sure that like those three, being Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler, are going to be three big players if they do another film, which I'm pretty sure they will do.
Oh, they'll definitely do another one. And I don't have a problem with any of the actors in it. I think everyone that was cast did a perfect job of the character. I would have just liked to have seen more character from them, and that's where I say that I don't know if a lot got cut out of this movie. For example, this isn't a huge spoiler, there's a scene where they all decide to go off to the mall, and there's a fairly cringe-worthy line involving a certain Star Wars movie after that, and then it just cuts. Now, I feel like there was a lot there where we could have got to have known the characters more, but I mean, at 2 hours 20... and to me anyway, I thought the pacing was really off in this film. It was very, very, very slow starting for practically the first half to me, with some exceptions to Fassbender's scenes. So I don't know if you added all these scenes in, if it would drag it down even more, if it would make it more fuller experience with the character. I don't know. But Apocalypse, so Oscar Isaac, when he was cast, I was over the moon because we're huge fans of Ex Machina. He's absolutely just indescribable in that movie. He is insanely talented in that film. He was in Star Wars Rogue One, not Star Wars Rogue One, Force Awakens as Poe Dameron. Didn't really have a whole lot to do in that film, but he was good nonetheless. So he is a solid actor, and when he was cast as Apocalypse, I was really, really excited. The look of him came out. A lot of people were bitching about that, saying he looked like Ivan Ooze from the Power Rangers movie. I didn't really have a problem with the look, to be honest. Having seen it in the final product now on screen, my only criticism is that I didn't really find him all that intimidating. I didn't really find him an iconic bad guy. Now, Apocalypse in the comic books, I haven't read any of the comic books, but I'm aware of the character. He is this demigod. He is this huge, towering, imposing figure over everyone and is terrifying. In this, where he's like standing next to like characters such as Psylocke, who even tower above Oscar Isaacs. I'm not saying that he needed to be like 12 feet tall or anything like that, but he just didn't have that imposing fact to me, and I think that's integral to the character of Apocalypse. So every time he was on screen, I never really felt terrified of this character or even scared of him. I think that Magneto, for example, if we're going in the history of the X-Men films, was a much more pivotal villain. He's a lot more interesting. Oscar Isaac didn't turn in a bad performance at all, but I just didn't... There wasn't anything really going for his character for me to care. And because of that, when it gets to like the world-ending stuff towards the end of the movie, I was just sort of like sitting back in my chair, just waiting for the climax to be over, because it was very predictable where it was going to go, and he just didn't really have any screen presence for me anyway.
The term generic was used, and I'd say yes, this is a generic villain. I'm not going to lie here. He could have been better done. I feel like better done in the way of being more imposing for the final fight scene, I'd say. His power was pretty cool. I know that wasn't really revealed in the trailer for what his power was, but...
Which power? Because his powers were all over the place in this movie. They kind of justify it in the film by saying that he kind of absorbs all the other powers of people he's come into contact with.
Powers through this weird ceremony, and the powers that he's gained from that. Could we talk about the powers, or should we do it in spoilers section?
We'll do it in spoilers, because some did take me by surprise actually in the film. But he does kind of have every power you can think of in this film,
except for one. But that is basically the main plot of the film.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But yeah, it's such a shame, because I won't say Oscar Isaac was wasted. I think he did the best of the material he had in this film.
I can't think of many other actors that could have played the role the way it was written.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to compare this villain to any other comic book character that we've had in the film recently, I'm probably going to go with Ronan from Guardians of the Galaxy. Yeah. And that's not just the fact that he's a big blue guy who wants to destroy the world, but just his lines, the delivery of the lines, things like that is very similar to that. And that was one of my problems with Guardians of the Galaxy, was the villain was kind of forgettable in that movie. However, I would say that I was actually more intimidated of Ronan than I was of Apocalypse in this movie. I don't know, that's just the way I felt, and because the film is kind of about him,
Yeah.
I just didn't have any sense. Now, as on the flip side, if we're going to go to Days of Future Past, the Sentinels, for example, you go with the opening scene in that film where all your favourite mutants are just getting all picked off one by one. That is a great scene, and that is genuine tension in the film as they try and stop these things from being made. In that film, Magneto is kind of a villain, as he always plays. He always kind of skirts the line between being on the team and the villain. You had Peter Dinklage in that film as Bolivar Trask, but he wasn't the main villain, really. The Sentinels were kind of the main antagonist threat in that film. And I thought they were brilliant. I thought they were brilliantly realised on film, and it was just such a shame that Apocalypse, who is this iconic villain to the X-Men franchise, I won't say was done awfully, but it was just kind of a whimper, really. There was just nothing going for his character, really. On the flip side, as I said, like the new cast, I thought Sophie Turner was great as Jean Grey. I was kind of worried after seeing the trailer with her American accent, which wasn't top-notch, I'm not going to lie, but bad. I did think she played a very believable young Jean Grey, I would say, if you're going to like compare her to the original actress from the old ones. I thought Cyclops was really, really good. Cyclops has always kind of had a bad rap so far in the X-Men franchise. The most notable film in the franchise that did that was X-Men 3, where he was killed off-screen. But I'm looking forward to it. This is what I'll say about this movie, is that I didn't really care for it. I found it very average, but it has made me really excited about where the X-Men franchise can go after this point.
Yeah. No, I'd say that as far as setting up for the next films, no matter how you view this film in the first place, this film does a very good job of setting up for the franchise to go ahead. It resets the universe, basically. I mean, I know that Days of Future Past did that, but it makes it a lot better to move forwards than it would have done with The Last Stand. And even I have to admit that, even as a person who actually doesn't mind The Last Stand that much, I would say The Last Stand really did kind of a number on, okay, this is the end of the story, this is where it ends. And this one has a very open ending. It allows people to move forwards and see where the future is going to go.
I mean, Last Stand, I don't want this to turn into a Last Stand review, but I will give it one thing. It was ballsy enough to kill off a lot of the cast in that film. Yeah. And I think that was done with the intention that people thought that that was going to be the final one. And then they had this whole string of origin films planned. I know they were going to kick off with Wolverine. They wanted to do X-Men Origins Magneto and Jean Grey and everything like that. And then that kind of backfired when Wolverine wasn't as big a hit as they thought it was going to be.
Dude, X-Men Origins Magneto was first class.
Yeah, it is, and that's the thing. I think they took the script ideas and story ideas that were still floating around from that film and then made it work in a new reboot / prequel / sequel. It was kind of amazing how they managed to pull that off. Let's talk a little bit about the action in this film, because there's a whole lot of it. In fact, I would say this is probably the most action-packed X-Men film we've had. Yeah. I know I said at the start that the first half is very talky, but man, when it hits that second act, it is kind of relentless up until the end. For anyone that's seen my reaction videos I've done on the X-Men series, the X-Men trailers for this film, I've always complained about these big blockbuster films that come out now that have some kind of world-ending device or something like that, where all the city's being pulled up into the sky. Independence Day Resurgence is getting ready to do it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 is going to do it. And you know what? Transformers 5, 6, and 7 are probably going to do it again. But it's just kind of a tired visual for me now. And that was a kind of another thing that was against this movie, is that with the X-Men film series, it hasn't really been about the action. It's been about the character dilemma and the drama from that, and then the action just kind of happens around that. I mean, Days of Future Past, when you look back at it, really didn't have all that much action. You had like a little bit of a Sentinel battle in the future, and then a little skirmish in front of the White House at the end. Yeah. But besides that, it was really just all character drama, and the characters drove that story. In this one, it is a very generic film, and again, I'm going to sort of compare it to Avengers Age of Ultron with this, in that you've got this kind of bland bad guy that just wants to take over the world and destroy it and tears up a city at the end. Yeah. And that's really it, and you kind of have all these characters fighting with each other, and you haven't really had all that much time to get to know them as characters, so there are just no stakes in this film. And you get all these big, wide CGI filled shots. Also, I'll just point out, I really didn't care for the CGI in this film. It kind of looked like Gods of Egypt CGI in many of the scenes in this film. It was wildly inconsistent. Some look great, but a lot of those shots in the final really didn't hold up well, even by today's standards, in my opinion. But you get a lot of these wide shots of big landmarks being destroyed. There's one from the trailer you see of the Sydney Opera House getting destroyed. So this whole thing is happening kind of worldwide. But you never really see any civilians or people screaming, so it doesn't make it personal enough. You're seeing all this wonderful action play in front of your eyes.
I'm sorry, Chris, but you want to see people screaming and dying.
Well, yeah, if it's apocalypse, yeah, it's this big blue guy destroying the world and wants to kill all humanity, but you don't see any humanity in it. It's kind of oh god, I've got to bring up Man of Steel again now. Oh boy.
Tread carefully,
here we go.
Because remember how my opinions of Man of Steel sit.
Yeah, I do, so I'm going to tread very, very carefully over this one. But it's kind of like the destruction of Krypton at the start, where in the original Superman movie, you see the civilians getting killed, and you do believe that this whole race of people are being destroyed in this cataclysmic event. And then Man of Steel, you see the council just sort of fighting over it, and then you really only see the destruction from Superman's mum's perspective, where the shockwave hits and kills everyone. But it doesn't make it personal enough. You don't really feel any stakes, and that's the biggest problem I had with this film, is that you have this character who's going to destroy the world. This should be the biggest bad guy that the X-Men have ever faced, and it's kind of rendered pointless because you don't really get any sense of the tragedy of it all. And I think that's kind of what my problem with the final ending scene of this film is, that I wasn't invested in the characters, and I wasn't even invested in the big event that was happening.
I'd say that the investment into the big event at the end is justifiable. They didn't do enough to set that up. I'd say that from previous films, like X-Men has had a very, very slow build through most films, and people have been used to that. I mean, Days of Future Past, I'd say that was a very big, slow boil film where not much happened until, I'd say, the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes. This film, it's very patchy with its action, it's very patchy with its drama and set pieces, and I wouldn't say that I was emotionally connected to the characters or the people just randomly throughout the cities and stuff like that. However, I understood the purpose of it, I understood how big it was. I mean, the one action that one of the main characters does in this film, which really does kind of go, okay, shit serious now. I actually felt, I actually turned because I was sat in the cinema with my dad, and he turned back to me and he just nodded and I just nodded back. So it had an impact, at least. I'll call my dad an average cinema goer, but
yeah. No, I mean, this film, this is where I kind of say, I'll touch on music first, and then we'll go into overall thoughts, and I'll sort of reply to what the point you just made there. So John Ottman returns with the soundtrack to this one. For anyone who doesn't know, John Ottman has worked with Bryan Singer a lot. He worked on Superman Returns, which was a great soundtrack, although it borrowed a lot of the musical cues from John Williams' great soundtrack. He worked on X-Men 2, as well as Days of Future Past, and then he returns for this one. And he has pretty much, besides the 90s cartoon X-Men franchise, has crafted the key X-Men main theme. I call it the main theme, even though it's only been used in 3 of the X-Men films. But it is kind of the go-to one now, and I think they are setting this up now as the main theme. And he is also the editor. I have never known how John Ottman finds the time to edit the movie and score the film as well. That's kind of insane. Although I guess that the two kind of would go hand in hand, because the edit of the film dictates the music cues and stuff like that, and he gets double the money as well, so I'm sure he's laughing his way to the bank. But really, really enjoyed the soundtrack to this one. There weren't as many musical cues in this one that stood out to me as much as Days of Future Past. But, you get some recurring themes. You get Xavier's theme from Days of Future Past come back in this, which was really nice. The main theme is always great, and it just sends chills down my body every time I hear it, and hearing that in the big screen again during the credits and the intro was great to hear. So a solid soundtrack, but not as good as the previous entries, I would say. So we'll go into overall thoughts then, positives and negatives from you, Tate, and then we'll go into spoiler section.
I'd say the positives from this film were that it did a good job to further extend the franchise and allow for room for more films to come forward. I liked the introduction of the new characters, and I liked the way that the film set up the different situations and scenarios. Maybe if the execution wasn't as good as hoped. The problem being the execution of the film in certain areas. And once again, I'll go back to a point that I made at the start without spoiling anything. This film really can be divided into 3 different sections. I liked 2/3 of it. I did not like a third of the film. And we can talk about the third of the film, which I didn't like, a little bit further. But, yeah.
Yeah, positives for me, other than hearing the main theme again. I applaud it for its ambition. I do think this is probably one of the most ambitious X-Men films they've ever tried to make, in that they've got so many characters to deal with and also setting up future films. Not in a really over-the-top, obtrusive way like Avengers Age of Ultron did with some of its characters and elements in that film. Every character in this is part of the story, but my negative sort of mirroring that is that the characters aren't really given enough to do. I don't think the story was as strong as it could have been, and I think it could have been benefited from a couple more rewrites. There were a few times in this film where I did actually think that a different writer had been on board with this one, but it is still Simon Kinberg writing the screenplay. I just think that the story wasn't as involved as it could have been to be a satisfying end to this trilogy, I guess. They're going to carry it on, obviously, but yeah, it is. I'll just say as well that there really weren't that many people in the audience who went to see this. At least in the screening I went to, I went
as well this opening weekend.
Yeah, I went last night, so Friday evening. And my friend was like, "Shall we book tickets?" Because I usually go with my mate to see all the big releases on the Friday. And other times, like for Civil War, we had to book tickets. Jungle Book, we booked tickets, and Batman v Superman and things like that, and they have all been a packed house. And I'm usually pretty good at predicting how many people are going to be there. And he was like, "Shall we book tickets for this one?" I was like, "You know what? I don't think we actually will need to for this one." And we got in. There really wasn't. I mean, there was still a decent amount of people in there, but not to the. I was expecting just a full house, full crowd in there, and the audience was pretty much dead, in all honesty, throughout like the whole film. Like, not many people were laughing at the jokes. No one was sort of, gasping or getting involved with it, like you would expect from the people that go and see it opening weekend, because you know that they're going to be the hardcore fans. I don't know if your audience was the same or if they were a bit more,
no, my audience
more lively.
My audience was pretty quiet, which is strange, because usually the audience in the cinema I go to opening weekend for even the smaller films is a bit more than what this was. So maybe my predictions of how comic book films are going is going to plan with this year. Yeah,
well, the next one we've got is Suicide Squad, I believe, isn't it, in August?
Remember, I said there would be 1 or 2 good comic book films this year. The rest of them will be crap. So we've already had 2, I'd say, good films. I really hope that Doctor Strange is good towards the end of the year.
Me too. The trailer looks interesting.
As far
I'm looking
as DC
forward to
films
it.
are concerned, it's a complete abyss at the moment. You don't know where it's going to go. People thought the Batman vs Superman, at least the first trailer, looked very good. They were very excited about it. The Suicide Squad first trailer, second trailer looked quite good. But then again, it may completely turn around and just be even worse than Batman vs Superman. And once again, I don't think I've made this clear enough, but there is way too much hate for these films at the moment, including Batman vs Superman, including X-Men The Last Stand, including this film. This film getting given a 2-star? Seriously?
Oh, I think the hate for Batman v Superman is justified. That wasn't a movie. That was a collection of images just jumbled in a random order with no narrative. I hated that movie.
But not in this podcast.
Yeah, no. For me, for superhero movies at this point, I really, really love Deadpool. Really pleasantly surprised by that one.
But you were only pleasantly surprised by it because it was something completely out of left field, and that's the only thing that seems to be entertaining nowadays. With Captain America Civil War, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people are still going to go see over this film, it was something way out of left field. It wasn't spoiled by the trailers, and it had a really good execution. if you're slightly off in execution nowadays, and if you're going for a middle down the road kind of storyline, which has been seen before, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's where comic book films are falling down. I feel like Doctor Strange may strive because it's going to be something completely different entirely. I mean,
it's a new
Marvel
character,
going
isn't it?
into the
So
realm
it's something
of
a bit
magic,
fresh.
It's going to be interesting. But any other film which is very generic, very middle down the road, which is why I don't think there's going to be a fourth X-Men film, and if there is, it won't work. I have worries about Spider-Man because, let's be honest here, over the 5 Spider-Man films that have been made since the Sam Raimi one, well, including the Sam Raimi ones, I'd say 2 I would like to see or watch again.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of with you, how you are with Last Stand with Spider-Man 3. I completely agree with everyone's opinions on it. I know it's a bad movie, but I still enjoy watching it. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's probably why they've thrown Tony Stark in there, so that people can see him in the trailer and go,
now they've also
I'll
got,
go and see that.
They've got the Birdman himself.
Yes, well, he's still in talks at the minute,
signed
as
up.
of now.
No, he's
Is he signed up now?
Completely signed up, as of today.
Nice! Fucking Michael
And
Keaton, I love that guy.
The Birdman himself will be playing the Vulture.
Oh, didn't you say this? Did you say this on the podcast once, that it's kind of hilarious how...
Yeah.
I'm going on a Spider-Man tangent here, so I'll bring it back to X-Men and we'll get into the spoilers, but how Sam Raimi was going to come back to do Spider-Man 4, wanted to do the Vulture. The studio didn't want to do the Vulture and sort of like kicked him out. He left the project. Sam Raimi also wanted to do the Lizard. They wouldn't let him do that. And then they reboot it. First villain they do is the Lizard. Yeah. And then that ends, and then they reboot it, and the villain they do is the Vulture, which is just kind of hilarious.
I do want to say, though, if you watch these 3 films back to back, it will tell a story. You first watch the Michael Keaton Batman film, or a Michael Keaton Batman film. You then go and watch Birdman, and then you watch the Vulture, all in that order.
I don't know how Spider-Man Homecoming is going to turn out. If it's good, that'll be a hell of a triple watch. Just going to say that.
We're calling that the
right.
Michael Keaton triple bill.
Yeah, and you know what? Just throw Spotlight in there as well. Why not? Spotlight was good.
Spotlight's the final role once he's retired.
Okay, right. Brief tangent there on
Spoiler
superhero
time.
films and Birdman. Let's get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen X-Men Apocalypse and you still want to see it, pause this review, stop it, go watch it, come back and hear what we have to say.
What is
so
your
you have
favourite
been
scene,
warned.
Chris?
We're jumping into
Yes,
favourite
we'll go
scene.
favourite scene.
I guess... Okay, I have 2. I'm going to say 2 because I like them for different reasons. My favourite geeky, just nerd out, just like collapse in chair from awesomeness is the very, very final scene of the movie. Not the post-credits scene, but the very end scene where you've got all the characters in classic costumes. Finally, they have some colour in the costumes. It's not all just black leather jumpsuits. There is some identity to them all. Mystique's in her classic blue and white costume. You've got Cyclops in his, and that was just, it was so, and they're in the danger room, and then the doors open and robotic legs walk out. And I'm like, please be Sentinels. Please be Sentinels. And the Sentinels come out, and I'm like, oh my god, and they're setting up for the new X-Men, so that was great. That was my geek out moment of the entire film.
Just remember that's how the X-Men The Last Stand started.
Yes, yeah, it's a great point as well. Yeah, because you see a silhouette of the Sentinel at that point in the film, don't you? The Sentinels weren't even a thing in that part of the film, so that was kind of random. But I guess that was just like a nice little Easter egg. I thought that as well. And there are some elements that they do take from that film, such as that, and even X-Men Origins Wolverine, which I will compare to my favourite character scene, which is pretty much just any scene with Fassbender. If I'm going to pick one, it's where his wife and child get killed in front of him.
That was haunting. That was, I say...
beautifully done.
That film was probably the most definitive moment of his character.
Yeah, and it's a direction they took Magneto that I didn't expect at all. The fact that after Days of Future Past, he tried to become a regular human being. He tried to have a normal life. He settled down, built a house for himself, wife, kid, everything was going great. People loved him.
Powers, and just when he was just kind of figuring out that was the case, it all gets taken away from him again, and that is a good enough motivation to go and want to destroy the world.
the fact that humans single him out when he was using his powers to help someone. X-Men, this is why X-Men's always been my favourite property of Marvel, because the thematic stuff in it is fascinating, and how you can merge it with real world things, and the human condition, things like that. Every single scene in terms of Magneto's, like, the stuff that he did post Days of Future Past was fantastic in this. He does kind of get lost towards the end when it gets into the action stuff, but the character stuff with Fassbender in this film was fantastic, and he just knocks it out of the park.
He does,
The bit where, you know, the arrows let fly, the audio cuts out, it goes through his wife and child, killing them instantly, and he just breaks down. It's such a believable performance.
He doesn't even have to look up. He just kind of is crying, sat down, and the destruction's going on in the background. That was just really well done scene, and probably, I'd say, one of two of the best scenes in the film.
And not only...
Go on.
Go on, sorry. I was just going to say more. I could talk about this scene all day. I love this scene so much. And it mirrored so much for the other X-Men films, for example, where he's getting carried away by the police and the daughter's screaming, and that's when her powers kicks in. Just completely mirrors Magneto, where he's screaming at the concentration camp gates when his parents are getting taken away. And the fact that he uses that silver medallion, that necklace thing, to kill all the people, and he looks at it with the blood on it, mirrors X-Men First Class with the coin that he had, which he drives through Sebastian Shaw's head. Just perfect scene, so well done. And that's why I can't hate this film in general, although I thought it was really average, like the bottom end of average. When there are scenes like this in the film that do it so well, it's impossible for me to come down too hard on the film. And also because it's X-Men and it gets a free pass because I love X-Men. But scenes like this, all the character scenes in this film, are what make it worth seeing, I would say.
I'd say that my favourite scene from X-Men Days of Future Past, I'm pretty sure it's your favourite scene from X-Men Days of Future Past, was the Quicksilver scene.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely
movie steal.
I wouldn't say it was as good, but it was still the best scene in this film, hands down. And it was the scene which I'm pretty sure everyone was waiting for, and it was the only reaction that I got from anyone in the entire cinema when they went to go and do that scene, and you realised what was happening in the scene, and wow. Just, they did it, even, I'd say, times 10. I enjoyed the initial reaction the first time around of not knowing what was going on, and then suddenly seeing it all unfold. This time, knowing what was going on, it was funny to see how it played out. It was the most comedic moment of the film. It was also probably one of the most dramatic moments, and I'd say the death of Havoc in there, and the fact that he didn't realise, and the only thing that I would have wanted to see here was him getting upset about that and going, oh shit, I couldn't save everyone, because that would have shown doubt in his powers, which we didn't see throughout the film.
Yeah, and Quicksilver does get quite a lot of humanity. Actually, towards the end, that was some of my favourite stuff, where it's like, will he tell Magneto that he's actually his son? And they'll probably save that for the next movie, hopefully, which it's going to get made, because X-Men, this will still make a load of money, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the thing with me, with that Quicksilver scene, and you've got Quicksilver in this movie, you have to expect another scene like that. You can't have the character in this movie again and not do a scene like that. They definitely tried to one-up it in terms of increasing the scale of it. It's a longer scene. It's more visually interesting. No, because the other one was visually interesting. It's just bigger and more bombastic, I would say, than the other one. My problem with it is that, as you said, it's the funniest scene in the film, which is also simultaneously taking place in what should be the most dramatic moment in the film, where the X-Mansion gets leveled. And I think tonally it clashed. I wasn't as shocked or invested in what was happening to the mansion, because I was smiling and laughing and enjoying Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by the Eurythmics. I'm not going to come down too hard on the scene. I thought it was very well done. I thought some of the effects work was a little shaky in some points. Did get very effects heavy.
In those kind of scenes, I know that him sticking in his music and getting on with his fingers is something quite good. It would have been interesting to see that scene with a lot less comedy and him literally running around trying to save everyone.
In the nick of time, yeah.
And having it just with the sound effects of like a slow-go explosion and just him, like the wind going past as he is trying to run through the house, trying to save everyone.
Some intense music.
And then once he saved everyone, he goes, I think I got everyone. And then someone says, where's Havoc? And then he goes, and then he maybe tries looking around, goes back in and can't find him, then breaks down. That would have been interesting to see.
Yeah, you make a great point with that. It would have been a nice progression for the character, especially, I mean, I'm sure Quicksilver's going to be in the next one as well, and they'll probably do another scene like this.
I'd say that behind Mystique, he is the most popular character at the moment in the X-Men universe.
Yeah, and that would have been a really, really nice bit of progression just from those individual scenes he has. I mean, in the first one, he was just like a wacky kind of loser of a kid, and he was just having fun with his powers. In this second one, where he makes his journey to the mansion to learn and to become part of the team, that's where you could have had that dramatic moment, as you just said. Everything you just said there, I completely agree with. And then in the third one, he could have been alongside the team, perhaps in the field, like in the final, and he could in the finale, and he could do a thing like that. As such, how it plays in the movie just kind of shows up conveniently at the right time, immediately knows that an explosion's about to go off, and does his thing. Sort of going off that point, I want to talk about another problem I kind of have with this movie is that not a lot happens sort of like narratively, like not many characters learn anything in this film, or things they set up which will further the X-Men franchise just kind of get sidelined again. So we finally get the X-Mansion with the students. Now, this was built at the very end of First Class, and you think, oh, this is going to link straight into the next movie. Days of Future Past rolls round, and they say that it was open for one semester, and then the Vietnam War kicked off, and a lot of the students were drafted, had to go away, and then Xavier just kind of broke down and became the shell of a man that he was in that film. And then in this one, the X-Mansion's built again. It's all up and running, great, and then they blow it up again to then rebuild it again at the end of the movie. I'm sure it's probably going to get blown up in the next movie. I think even Deadpool referenced that in the movies, say like, or was it Negasonic Teenage Warhead, that we live in the mansion that always gets destroyed every year or something like that. You have I think it's called the X-Jet, or the plane they're in. It's under the basketball court. Looks fantastic. You expect them to use it in the film, and they blow it up and they use a subpar aircraft in the rest of the film. And it's just like they set everything up like this perfectly that you want to see play out on screen. They destroy it, and then everything's sort of built back up to the equilibrium at the end of the movie, and it never carries over. So that was kind of a problem I had with me. With the exception of like Mystique's character, I think that that's set up in a good way where she's going to train them up. But then again, next movie she's probably going to turn into a bad guy again. There's just never any consistency.
I feel
really
like
for
next
me.
movie the main villain will be Psylocke. It'll be a small time X-Men movie, and I feel like Psylocke will be a huge part of it. And I feel like she may try and create her own X-Men type thing.
Yeah, I mean that would be cool. She as I said, Olivia Munn.
The finale will be a telepathic showdown between Psylocke and Jean Grey. That you're hearing it here for like first, folks. That is the plot to the new X-Men film.
We've got to talk about the finale in this film as well in terms of that.
X-Men Psypocalypse.
Oh. But no, like with Psylocke, as I said, like Olivia Munn, fantastic casting. Visually, she looks completely just off the page of the comic book. Her powers are cool, everything like that. There was just no character. I think, as I said, she got like one line of dialogue.
2 or 3 lines of dialogue, and I didn't know her motivation. Did they actually say her motivation at any point during the film?
No, and that's the problem I have with a lot of these 4 horsemen that's recruited. It's all very paint by the numbers. It's very, join me. No, we can amplify your powers. Okay. And then apparently, as well as being just demigod and world destroyer, Apocalypse is like also professional seamstress and could just make everyone's costumes.
He took an art
fantastic
degree in fashion and stuff like that. He studied in Milan or Prague or something like that. But
I want to know what mutant he like transcended into to take that power from them. Like he was like, oh, that power is too fabulous for me to not have. Now I can create fabulous costumes for everyone.
Well, he knows his way around Egyptian cotton.
Yeah. Oh my god, Apocalypse's powers though were so all over the place in this movie. I guess we could talk about that one now in spoilers, where you can just like phase people into walls, and it's like Pirates of the Caribbean, part of the crew, part of the ship.
That is his main power, right?
Yeah, and the thing, and also that he can like slit people's throats with sand. What?
I worked out that his power was breaking things down to its basic elements and being able to move them.
Yeah, to be honest, I think the coolest powers came from his four horsemen in the opening of the film. Where that woman sort of just like crushes and crumbles that guy into like a horrible heap of bone, blood, and just throws it. That was epic. I did actually like the opening scene of this film. I thought that was very, very, very well done. I liked seeing the Four Horsemen back in history. And speaking of the Four Horsemen, when he's recruiting everyone, Metallica's gets a song in this movie from their first album, The Four Horsemen, conveniently. Angel in this movie, what a wasted opportunity, man. I mean, I saw Angel was going to be in this film, and then you've also got like Jean Grey and Cyclops, and Angel was one of the first X-Men, I believe, in the very, very first issue of the comic book. The X-Men that you had in that were Iceman, Angel, Beast, Jean Grey, and Cyclops, and I just thought that would have been so cool to have had him on the lineup. He looked great. And then he kind of gets the metal wings, and I was really just like, oh, but he looked cooler where he just had the regular wings. And you know what? I'm going to say it. This might piss off a lot of people. I think Angel was better in The Last Stand.
No, I'll agree with you there. As a person who doesn't mind The Last Stand, I can safely say that Angel was better in The Last Stand.
In The Last Stand, he was completely wasted in that film. He had about 2 scenes. He had one towards the opening and the ending. But man, that opening scene where it's the kid in the bathroom and he's like, just like grating his wings off his back is violent, it's visceral, and that was a great moment. And the relationship we had with his dad, character wise, although he was only in 2 scenes, there was just a lot more going for him in that film, I thought. And then he shows up and helps the team at the end. This guy looks cool. The cage fight at the start was kind of cool, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a kind of a interesting way to kickstart these characters, that he's kind of part of the Munich circus, like Underground Wrestling Federation or whatever that was, where we also get a cameo of the character of Blob, who is literally just knocked out and then stretchered off immediately. But I thought, okay, this is a cool way. And he has that moment where he's talking to Nightcrawler and he's like, look, man, look, we got to fight, otherwise they're going to kill us both. And I thought, okay, this character's kind of cool. And then Apocalypse just shows up and says that we can amplify your powers and give you like metal wings and stuff. And then he stops becoming a character and he's merely just there. And then he's killed off. And I was like, here you go again, X-Men. You introduce all these cool, new, interesting characters that could be this driving force of the new incarnation of the X-Men. Now is the time to bring all the new characters in so that you could have them for all the rest of your movies. And then he's killed off, and it's just, this is what I mean. It's just a wasted opportunity for me with all of the characters in terms of the Four Horsemen. But as you said, if Cyclops comes back for the next movie, hopefully she has more to do, but I don't know if it's a little too late so far. Like, this was the chance to really flesh a character out. Speaking of like cameos and stuff, shall we get on to the biggest cameo in the movie? Sure. Okay. Wolverine is unsurprisingly back because he was spoiled in the trailer that he was going to be in this movie. Now, this is sort of where... This is the point where X-Men now has corrected the timeline and it's doing its own thing. However, there is one contradiction from the ending of Days of Future Past which has really just like screwed my brain over trying to think about this. So Wolverine is at Alkaline Base, I believe it is, which is still the same place from X2, which was kind of cool to see. Stryker's there, and he has clearly been working on Weapon X, and Weapon X is the Wolverine. Everyone knows that. They've seen it in like 2 movies now. So he breaks out and he does the classic rampaging through the corridors and escapes, everything like that. But the very final shot of Days of Future Past was the notion that you can correct time, but the current of time will always find a way to correct itself eventually. Yeah. Like, you can... I think the metaphor in that movie is that you can throw a pebble into a stream, but the current will always correct itself. So they said that although things will be slightly different, key plot points will still happen. For example, Wolverine will still get the adamantium on his bones. Yeah. The final shot of that movie is Stryker fishing Wolverine out of the water that Magneto thrown him into, turns to the camera and has yellow eyes, implying that Mystique is under the disguise of Stryker and is taking Wolverine away to get his powers. Why? I was hoping they would explain that in this movie. I was like, Mystique's clearly got a bigger plan going on here. Is she going to create Wolverine and use him as a henchman for her own ends? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm interested. In this movie, it's the regular Stryker who has Wolverine. Yeah. So, was there ever a moment where Stryker returned to Alkaline Base and then all his henchmen are like, "Sir, we have the Wolverine you bought in. He's strapped down," and he'd be like, what? Wolverine? What? Who sanctioned this? I have been betrayed. So that is probably the biggest inconsistency between this trilogy, which is a shame because they have a lot of flashbacks to Days of Future Past and especially First Class in this movie, which really make it feel as part of a whole.
No, I agree with you completely. I did think that was a bit unusual, and I think it's just a massive plot hole. But we can ignore that.
I've ignored plenty in the X-Men franchise at this point. But I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think we needed a Wolverine cameo in this film?
No. Although the next film is going to be the Wolverine, so I was expecting the end credit sequence to do with it.
And it still could potentially be?
Yeah, Essex Corp.
Maybe? Yeah.
That could be one of three things. Deadpool 2, Gambit movie, or Wolverine. I don't think it's going to be to do with the next X-Men film.
No. So here's the thing, though, because that's going to be Old Man Logan, they've said, because it's going to be Hugh Jackman's allegedly last appearance of Wolverine. Yeah. Will that take place after this? So either late 80s, into the 90s maybe, or will this be post-corrected timeline in Days of Future Past where all of the people are old in the mansion, so that could be still into the 2000s?
I think it will be 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah, because he kind of runs out into the open in this film, doesn't he? And I guess you're meant to infer that he goes on his own way and then is recruited eventually by the X-Men. Yeah. Where he will appear younger and less beardy and slightly less muscular.
He runs away to Canada, dude. Give him a chance.
So this is the thing. It's kind of in this awkward state now where it is corrected, yes, and it is different, but similar things will happen. Yeah. So I was like, can you now just pop in X-Men 1 and go back to that? And I'm like, well, no, you can't because it's different now. Is there anything else we could talk about in this? I guess we could talk about the final fight. I realise that we've been going for over an hour now, so we'll kind of try and wrap it up as quick as we can. Final fight.
Overcrowded. That was my only comment on it.
I did think it was kind of cool, though, because I was watching the whole movie, and I remember one of my favourite bits from the trailer was where Apocalypse is in the X-Mansion, and he grows just fucking huge and just picks Xavier up like a ragdoll and slamming him into pillars and stuff. And like when the X-Mansion got blown up, I was like, wait, there has to be an extended cut of this movie, right? Because that scene wasn't in there. And then I did actually think it was kind of cool how, yes, you did have the big CGI slog and punch him up like you get in all these superhero films, but they took the Battle of Apocalypse into Xavier's mind.
Yep.
And it was a mind battle. And I thought that was really kind of cool how they handled that. Apocalypse does look kind of corny, though, when he gets big and he's like lumbering through the corridors just really awkwardly. And I like how Xavier relied on Jean Grey's help. Like, he wasn't this all-powerful man, even though he is one of the best mind readers and telepaths there is.
Well, he stated earlier on in the film that Jean was the most powerful he's ever encountered.
Yeah, and the fact that he says that, she can't control her powers. And I thought that was a nice moment as well earlier in the film where Jean Grey and Cyclops have that bonding moment where they both don't have the full grasp on their powers yet.
See, that is a better love story setup than what was done in the original X-Men franchise.
Oh, yeah, they were just kind of awkwardly together, weren't they? And then they brought in the love triangle thing. That never kind of worked for me. Cyclops does get some funny moments, though, early in the film. For example, that bit with the tree. Yeah. That really made me laugh. And McAvoy plays that so brilliantly. But the mind battle takes place, and finally we get the official Dark Phoenix appearance, or at least the Phoenix appearance in this one. And you could tell that Bryan Singer has always wanted to do this. He jumped ship after X-Men 2. Brett Ratner took over and made Last Stand, and he kind of didn't realise the Dark Phoenix story as well as should have been. Unfortunately, two franchises kind of got marred by that occurrence because Bryan Singer then went on to do Superman Returns, and that movie was pretty much terrible as well and killed the Superman franchise for a while. But, he's back now. It does feel at home under Bryan Singer's direction. Like, it feels like an X-Men movie to me. So I hope he does stick around, but I know that he's been in the game with the X-Men franchise a long time now and he might want to do other stuff. But seeing Dark Phoenix on screen screen was kind of amazing, and it has made me very excited with the hopes that the next movie could do that storyline justice.
Yes, finally. I really want to see it.
If it chooses to do it that early, maybe they'll want to save that for a fifth one. I don't know, but now that they've planted the seeds of it, it's made me very, very excited.
X-Men Psypocalypse Parts 1 and 2?
Oh god, no, please. Just
if
stop
you'd like
this
to
thing
tweet
with
this
Splinter.
video, X-Men Psypocalypse.
I'd still watch it. It's X-Men, right? So yeah, speaking of Psypocalypse, Psylocke gets away at the end.
Yes.
She kind of just has this moment where she looks back, scowls, and then walks away awkwardly through the destruction. Also, I thought it was kind of easy how Apocalypse is beat, in all honesty.
Beaten
like
by
Magneto's
5 mutants at the same time after his mind gets destroyed.
Yeah, like Magneto does the whole throwing the metal beams into the ground in an X symbol, because X-Men, right? We have to have an X there. And then they're all kind of doing their powers, and, you know, he's holding out. And it's only when Storm joins the fray that he starts to die. I'm like, was he weak against electricity or something? Or
is it like a Apocalypse is blue, therefore he's a water type. Therefore, of course, he is weak to electricity.
Just acquire the gym badge at the end of the fight.
You know, steel types don't do much damage against water, so neither do actually psychic types. Depends on what his second element is. If he is, you know, psychic dark, then you know, it might work.
No, I had it more down as a Captain Planet thing. Like, with our powers combined, we can take out Apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
It does actually get kind of a cool death scene, though. It's kind of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where you drink the wrong cup and you just kind of decompose and break apart, like muscle, tissue, bone. That was kind of cool. And I've already massively geeked out about the final scene of this film. I can only think that before Apocalypse's death, he got very creative one night and created all the X-Men costumes for the team.
Yeah.
All flamboyant colours and amazingly crafted. But it was kind of cool to see that.
In all of those years where he was stuck in the ground, he was just thinking, do you know, I'm going to make some badass costumes. Here we go. I'm going to have one where he's going to have metal wings. Oh, that'd be so sick. Yeah, high five me.
I want a post-credit scene of Apocalypse just being like a fashion designer, just like flamboyantly camp and just amazingly glorious, just creating all these costumes for everyone. That would be great.
And from the ashes of this world, we will design a better one.
I wanted that so bad. It was cool seeing the X-Men all in their costumes in the final shot where they're all lined up, and then it cuts to credits. Boom, that John Ottman theme kicks in, and you know, a good ending can elevate an average movie because that is the final scene that you're left with. And I came out, as I said earlier, of this film very excited of where the X-Men franchise can go now after this film.
Yeah. Awesome.
Post-credit scene. I saw the post-credit scene and I was like, that means something to someone, but I'm very confused. I kind of looked into it and they say that Essex Corps has something to do with Mr. Sinister. And in the comic books, they kind of can't do this now, but Mr. Sinister, I believe, if someone knows the comics, drop us a comment and let us know, is the guy that actually awakens Apocalypse in the comic books. Now, they can't do that with this film, although it does kind of seem like a massive wasted opportunity if your next villain is going to be Mr. Sinister, and that's a key part of his origin, when you could have set that up in this movie. Or, as you said, it could be something to do with the next Wolverine film, or Deadpool, because Mr. Sinister or that cult has something to do with the creation of Cable, and Cable's going to be in Deadpool 2, so I don't know. If anyone knows anything about that scene, please drop us a comment, because I like to know what's going to happen in my movies. For example, I saw Thanos at the end of Avengers 1, and I was like, that means something to someone, because people are gasping in the audience, so I'm going to assume that it's a comic book thing. But no, everyone just kind of sat in the credits and then was like dumbfounded, like, oh, we're gonna have to Google this when we get back to the car. I've pretty much said everything I can on this movie. If you've got anything else you want to add just to finish off, or we'll close up on it.
Yep, X-Men Psypocalypse, 2018. Call it.
Final recommendation then. You'd recommend people
I
go and see
recommend
X-Men
go see
Psypocalypse and this movie.
Seriously,
Yeah?
Yeah.
For me, if you're a fan of the series, go and see it. It's entertaining enough. It's another X-Men film. We only get one of these every 2 years. There are some solid character moments in it, but if you're going to compare this to any of the previous entries, I would probably rank this quite far down the list. For example, I think that Days of Future Past, Deadpool, First Class, X-Men 2, I'm even inclined to say X-Men 1 I preferred to this movie. I probably need to rewatch X-Men 1 as I don't know how well that's held up since it came out in 2000.
As far as CGI is concerned, it hasn't.
Oh boy, yeah, and plus you have that Storm line that when she's confronting Toad, I can't even remember it. It's so bad.
By lightning. What happens to a Toad when it gets hit by lightning? The same as everything when it gets hit by lightning.
Oh
my God, Storm! Just away with the dad jokes, jeez.
Joss Whedon wrote that line. Oh boy. But yeah, that'll do it for our review on X-Men Apocalypse. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of X-Men Apocalypse. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Anything you like, where you think the franchise is going to go. Please do drop us that comment. Also, let us know what the post-credit scene is, because I really genuinely want to know. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, I have now got to get on and record many reaction videos. A lot of trailers have gone up, so I need to get on those right now. Things are happening with the channel. We can't go into it in too much detail yet, but things are happening, which we can hopefully announce very soon. We also have our voting system up, straw poll, for our second episode of Timestamp Zero. That will be next weekend, Sunday the 29th.
That only has 1 week left to vote, guys. So if you want to see, Rush, Dead Man's Chest, The Wrestler, Senna, or The Dark Knight Rises, which, by the way, just saying this now, it's Chris's most hated film of modern times. So you should totally go and vote for that. Then you can vote on the straw poll, because whatever film gets voted at the top, we will be watching in depth whilst doing almost like a fan commentary of it at the same time.
Yep, and our first episode, Prestige, that went really well. Had a lot of fun with that. And there is a clear-cut winner so far on the voting,
Rush,
but as I say,
yeah,
it is Rush at the minute, but get your votes in, because that could all change. We'll have other reviews coming up later in a few weeks. We've got Alice in Wonderland next week, and then we've got TMNT 2 and Warcraft. So lots happening with the channel. Please do hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to keep updated with all of our content. But until then, that'll do it for this video, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for listening.